Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more buckshot testing, and today we've got another new shell that we've never tried with a setup that we've tested a bunch of on the channel before, but we've never ran any buckshot through it. So I'm definitely excited to see what this combination can actually do and to see if we can actually get a good pattern out of it or not. But for the shell I've brought here today, I picked up some of these. These are some Winchester Super-X shells. They are a 12 gauge, 3-inch, 24 pellet load of 1 buck, moving about 1,040 feet per second. Now right off the bat, I would kind of like to see at least 1140, if not about 1200 out of these shells personally. So that box velocity is a little bit low for my personal taste, but it's still good enough, and we'll see what we actually get for velocity out of this setup anyway. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what these can do through this setup, because as per the back of the box here, they are a buffered load, which definitely helps a lot of buckshot shells out. It doesn't appear though that they are plated or have a wad, so these are kind of right in the middle. They could do pretty decently, they could be a little disappointing. We're just gonna have to see what happens. But as for the setup I've got to run them through today, I brought out my Remington 870 special purpose with a Carlson's 24-inch barrel on it and a stock full choke. And typically I like to start with full chokes with most buckshot shells, and we can tune them in from there. So we'll see what this setup can actually give us with these Super-X 24 pellet 1 buck shells. It should be a decent performance setup. I think it's just going to come down to what the shells can do. But as for today's test, everything is set up the same as usual for one of these buckshot tests. I've got the big sheet of paper at 40 yards. I've got the chronograph so we can get our velocity, and I've got the templates that we can lay up over our results as well. So let's get you guys a view of this target, and we'll take this shot and see just what kind of a pattern we're able to get from these Super-X 24 pellet 1 buck shells through the 870 with a full choke today. Alright, so that shell gave us 969 through the chronograph, which right off the bat seems like an error, but remember the box claim is only 1,040, so we are not that far below that box claim, and we have a 24-inch barrel. Chances are they probably ran it through like a 28 or something at the factory. So I actually kind of do believe that number is correct based on how they sounded. Now they felt like a normal buckshot shell. They definitely weren't anything as far as low recoil goes or anything like that, and this is kind of what I was concerned about seeing that box claim. I would definitely like to see another 150 feet per second out of these right off the rip. So that way, when people do run them through a little bit shorter of a barrel, they still can keep a little bit of velocity. Now, 24 pellets of 1 buck is a pretty stout load, so there is that factor to take into it, but still little disappointing as far as velocity, but I think the reading was actually correct. But what kind of a pattern were they able to give us down at 40 yards anyway? Let's go check it out and see what we got. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and this is what we got. And for a reference, the white dot was my point of aim. The paper is 36 inches wide by about 42 inches tall or so. And we had 23 out of the 24 pellets that actually hit the paper here. I think number 24 might be up here in this dead middle board, if you can see that tiny little hole there in the middle of your screen. So I think that's pellet number 24, but just to be certain on the paper, we had 23. And this pattern is kind of a little bit middle of the road, I would say. It's definitely not bad whatsoever. It is very usable, but it is a little bit more on the broad and spread open side. We don't really see a super hot condensed area of pellets in the core, but we really don't see a ton of flyers or strings either. It's just kind of a broad swath of shot across the paper. So for you guys that may be on a deer drive or something like that, taking shots on moving deer or moving pigs or something like that, that pattern is gonna be plenty good enough. And it gives you that little bit more wiggle room to work with while still having plenty enough pellets actually in your animal sized area, which we'll throw some templates up here in a second. But I would say this pattern definitely lends itself more to moving targets than stationary targets. So we could have seen a lot worse as for a pattern here today, but if they did have a wad and were plated, they probably would have been a little bit better as well. So as for the pattern on the blank sheet of paper, kind of middle of the road. So let's throw up a couple templates and get a little bit better of a reference as to how they actually did. Alright, so here's our 10-inch circle, and if we line it up with where our rough core would be, because I think we were pretty centered up on the paper, we only got 2 pellets within a 10-inch circle, which isn't fantastic when you have a 24 pellet load, that's for sure, but it kind of goes back to the same thing I mentioned a minute ago, where this pattern doesn't necessarily have a super hot core, it's just kind of a broad area of shot. And really, no matter where we move that 10-inch circle on that paper, we would have between 2 and 4 pellets in there, pretty much no matter where we put it. So definitely nothing outstanding or groundbreaking as far as the core goes, that's for sure. But let's throw some actual animals up, which will give us a little bit better reference as to how this shot would have done in an actual hunting type of scenario. Alright, so here's the deer template, and as you can see, if we would line it up with our actual point of aim, you would have somewhere in the ballpark of 12 to 13 pellets that would have definitely hit him for sure. And this really shows just how broad of a swath of shot it is. We don't have a super condensed core right in our vital area, you just kind of have pellets that cover most of the animal. So for me, this pattern isn't really one that I would search for most of my hunting scenarios, on deer anyway. It's just a little bit too broad of a pattern. Too many pellets and meat that I really don't want to hit. But you can see how on a moving target, like on a deer drive, that would absolutely give you enough wiggle room to feel a little bit more comfortable. So definitely plenty usable enough to get you a deer with, but not perfect either, I wouldn't say. So let's throw the hog template up there real quick, just for a size reference on some of those little bit smaller animals as well, and see how that one looks. Alright, and here's that hog template, and if you would have taken this shot on a hog, you would have had somewhere in the ballpark of 14 to 15 pellets that would have definitely hit him, and once again, he's pretty well covered in shot. And for a size reference, a coyote might be just a touch smaller than this hog template, so if you were to use these on a coyote, you would still have a good enough pattern for them, but you definitely wouldn't be hitting them with the majority of the load all in one area. So I guess overall here, this is not a bad pattern. It is a usable pattern all day long. You could absolutely hunt with it, but it's definitely not a condensed pattern either. And I have a feeling that we can get a little bit better out of these with the right choke. I'm thinking potentially that Kicks buck kicker full choke might really help these shells out some and bring them in. So that's definitely worth a try, that's for sure. But for a starting point, I'd say they're pretty middle of the road. But at least they still gave us a usable hunting pattern at the end of the day. Although it's definitely nothing groundbreaking. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about that pattern right there? I'd say it's pretty middle of the road. It is absolutely a usable hunting pattern, but it is a much more broad and open spread than what I typically prefer if I'm going to hunt with a buckshot shell. Now for a moving target on a deer drive or something like that, yeah, that's going to be pretty decent. But for a stationary animal on a typical tree stand type of hunt, I would prefer to see a little bit more of a condensed pattern. And I think with the right choke, we can bring that in just a little bit, but I think our limiting factor is going to be the fact that they don't have a wad and they're not plated. I think we can definitely see better than that, but how much better is going to be the question, and we'll see as we continue to test them. But I guess I'll leave it up to you guys. Let me know your thoughts about it down in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these Super-X 24 pellet $1 shells? And if so, what kind of results have you seen from them? Would you hunt with that kind of a pattern, or would you want to see it just a little bit more condensed into a tighter overall group? And is there another choke or setup combo that you might want to see us run those shells through? Let me know all that down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.